The Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wasatch Report. I am Suzanne Sherman. This is the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Want to wish everybody a happy new year. This is our first broadcast of the year 2019. Today is January 3rd. Joining me in the studio is Greg Junkbond Carpenter and our producer and co-host, Jeff Johnson. Want to say thank you both for showing up today and remind people you can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network, our fan page, CRN. Want to thank all the new folks that have joined us over there. We have a SoundCloud page also by the same name, Radio Co-Link. If you go and to our Facebook page, you can listen. We have something playing 24/7. For instance, my show's The Wasatch Report, The Mark and Suzanne Show, Revolutionizing Radio. Dan Bailey did a show a couple weeks ago, The Bailey Report. Jeff Johnson, I think you even cranked out a paradigm shift. We're going to get you back going live again, too. Greg, I believe you have a new Liberty Minutes that we're going to upload if we haven't already. Case in Point is up there as well. We have the Mike Meharry podcast, all sorts of cool stuff for you to listen to. Jeff also helped me record 2 audio versions of my recent articles, Immigration, the Constitutional Solution to Immigration, and the Church of National Government, both of those published by the 10th Amendment Center. We're going to get some more of those available for you as well. I'm going to admit right now, I am very, very distracted. As we were prepping for the show, I opened my front door to let my cats in, and there was a herd of about 250 elk in my next door neighbor's field, and they were all looking right at me and squawking and chirping. And to see them out here in daylight, just going across the field and up the ridge by my house, was just an amazing sight to see. So I've got elk on the brain right now, but fortunately we've got help here to keep me focused a little bit. Greg, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing very well. Merry New Year to everyone. And I don't know how well I'm going to do to keep you focused, because I would get just as distracted by the elk myself. We have a total of 3 elk out here in the Democratic People's Republic of Northern Virginia. I guess they're not socialist elk. They're because they run and they hide and they skitter their way through here. We're not even supposed to have elk in this area. We have about, I'd say, probably 24 deer that live up on the hill where I'm at, and 3 elk. And other than a couple of fox and a couple owls, that's about it for the wild animals out here. So I don't even have a variety like you have out there in Utah.
Well, you know, not only am I out here in Utah, I'm in the hinterland. So I had people over here actually for New Year's Eve. And when it's wintertime and you come here for festivities, you spend the night. You don't drive back down these roads at night. We had a guest house full of people. It carried on till the next day. It was absolutely a fantastic time. But I want to share a couple of incidents, because now we are in the midst of winter and we are seeing the effects of it out here. In fact, yesterday I was driving back from Park City and I was looking at the tracks along the road when you go off the main street up to my house. And I'm looking at them, I said, I think those are elk tracks. Those don't look like deer tracks. And sure enough, I saw that today. But I want to talk about a couple of incidents that happened. I like to start off these shows about preparedness and survival because, again, the Wasatch Report, that is an essential element of life, of living up here, is you never know when you're going to come across a situation where things can change drastically. And when I go on and on and on about my vehicle preparedness kits and being ready when you're out in the wilderness, it's for very good reason, because this is the wilderness. And you might think you're just going to, for instance, a party at Suzanne's house and we're going to be inside and warm. What could possibly go wrong? Well, my son and his dad were driving up here and we were waiting for them. They had been running late, but excuse me, we were looking out and waiting, and our roads right now are covered in ice. And my boy's dad, he has a nice 4-wheel drive vehicle and he's got all-weather tires. All-weather tires aren't going to cut it up here. And that car went off and into a ditch. no radio, or I'm sorry, no phone reception service anywhere, no signal in this canyon here. Fortunately, they were only less than a quarter mile from my house. Jeff, you've been on the road. You know where that hay barn is coming out of my place?
Yes.
It was right there. You can see where it went off into the ditch there. And they had to walk, between a quarter and 2/10 of a mile. So it wasn't horrible. But when you're below zero, it gets horrible pretty quickly. And they couldn't reach us. And they were trying to flash a light, but there was a snow bank blocking the view. So they had to walk that way. And it probably took about 10 minutes. And just to see, what he looked like just walking 10 minutes in that. He didn't have a hat. My son had a jacket with a hood. He had my boy's dad had a heavy jacket on and proper attire, but I could tell it really affected him. I always have something to cover my entire head, a scarf, so I don't breathe that cold air in directly. This time of year, it's not good to breathe in, air that is below freezing. And when I say freezing, I don't mean 32 degrees. I mean sub-zero temperatures. So we got them in, got them warmed up. But imagine the situation if they'd been in a ditch, the vehicle's integrity was compromised. They couldn't have gotten out. Think about what would happen. So always be ready. Fortunately, got them in here, and everything was a-okay. The other thing I want to share was a story that happened to a friend of mine. He was taking out some hunters up above where I live, and he's got a beautiful vehicle for it. It's a fully enclosed side by side. It can seat 6 people, and it's got a heater, and it's on tracks. What could possibly go wrong? Well, they get way out there and they're hunting these elk and an axle breaks. Yeah. So, and anyway, Eric Betcher, the survivalist, was going to join us a little bit this morning, but because we have so many other things to talk about and he's a little laid back, or he's got something else going on, I'm just going to share this story with you. So anyway, they were up there and my friend had to hike back down to the truck where there was a snowmobile on the trailer. Took him 4 hours to do that at night by himself in deep snow. I said, why didn't the other hunter come with you? Well, he was 75 years old, so he couldn't have made it. Well, the vehicle's turned off. It's not going to stay warm forever. I guess you can turn it back on and warm it up intermittently. But the guy had no survival gear other than his jacket and his gun. But you think you're just going to be there in the snow. I apologize for me clearing my throat. Like I said, when it is below zero here, this air is dried. It makes for a really scratchy throat. So anyway, he had to hike down 4.5 hours before he get the snowmobile and ride back up the hill and bring his customer down. And I said, why wasn't somebody in a chase vehicle, like a snowmobile, another guide or something like that? So you think you're just going out there, you've got brand new equipment, something can always go wrong. And Jeff, you're a paramedic, EMT. What do you think the effects of a 75-year-old man, even in an enclosed shelter in below zero temperatures, what kind of effect that's going to have after about 4 or 5 hours by the time he got off the mountain?
Well, unfortunately, all of us are getting older. And as we get older, our body does very poorly at temperature regulation. So as we get older, it's harder to keep warm or to stay cool. It's just a natural process of getting older. So for a 70-some-year-old person in those conditions for 4 hours, it could quite possibly could have ended up being fatal. So, I mean, you just got to be prepared for stuff like that.
Yeah, we were bull elk hunting down in the Wellington area, which is a little bit north of Moab. And on the trail coming back, I'd been there the day before. We were waiting and waiting. Finally, at about 9 or 10 o'clock, they sent out some people to go up that road, and a tree had actually fallen and blocked the road, and there was no getting around it. And again, this was an elderly, beg your pardon, client who was again in his 70s and out there. And this buggy did not have an enclosure, so the snow had been starting as well. So folks, even if you're out there and you have a guide, somebody taking you around, and always plan. I always have a bag, even when they say there's no room in the buggy for that bag. I said that I don't go either. Prepare to spend the night everywhere you go. So just my little bit of mountain stories and what the life has been like up here for us in the winter. Did everybody have a happy New Year?
I'll let Jeff go first.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, yes, I did. I spent it with family. We had a big gathering at my brother's house, and we had a nice time. We played some games and had some fun. Ate a lot of food.
Conversely, on the other hand, I cooked a lot of food and had little to no fun in the kitchen. I did. I spent the whole holiday season from the 22nd of December through the 2nd of January cooking and cleaning, making sure my wife had time off because I had my brother-in-law come down from Schenectady, New York with his family. That's 5. I had my other brother from Brooklyn come down with his family. That's 4. My daughter came in from Colorado Springs with her family. That's 5. My father flew in from Austin, Texas. That's 1. But some people would argue that having my dad here was like having 3 or 4 extra kids in the house. So we had a house and a half full of peoples. And then my other sister-in-law from Manhattan came down with her husband. So we had quite a few people come by and hang out over the holidays with us. I made 2 cheesecakes, Christmas dinner. I slipped hot dogs in one night just because I ran out of energy.
It's fun having a bunch of people here. I have to say, my son thought I'd be stressed out because I'm usually here by myself, or my younger son maybe, and it's so quiet. But I absolutely enjoy having people here to enjoy.
It's great, isn't it? It's just great.
It is. I just love it. There's a story, and this is not as positive and as uplifting as the nice New Year's we had, but this is a story that I wanted to discuss last week. And then because you're here, Greg, I've got a couple other things. There was a story about energy companies providing internet services and and then there's a lawsuit also against Google with facial recognition and what was the other thing? And then about this new Green Deal that the Social Democrats are pushing in Congress. But there's a story I wanted to address. And since we've got you for the whole hour, I'd like to talk about this. I wanted to get into this before the end of the year, and we never got to it. This is a local story out of the Deseret News. And it's about a woman who was confronted with an intruder in her home. And because we talk about this so much here, I wanted to review our preparedness, both, like we said, in our vehicles, but also personal security inside the home. The headline here says, trembling Utah woman tied up in her house could barely speak to 911, police say. This was out of Midvale, which is in the Valley area here, Salt Lake area. It starts off again. I beg your pardon with my voice. This air, it just really does a number on us up here. It says, with her voice still trembling, a woman who police say was just tied up in her home by an intruder could barely speak with emergency dispatchers. A man armed with a knife who spoke only Spanish entered her home. And according to police, the 44-year-old woman lives there, heard a noise in her home. Now we're all thinking, I know similar things right now, but I'll get into that after. When she went to investigate, she was confronted by a man wearing a black hoodie and a mask that covered most of his face except for his eyes. The man demanded the keys to the Corvette parked in the driveway. The woman repeatedly told the man it was her husband's car and she did not have the keys. The man then tied her hands behind her back, took other items from the house, and left. On Thursday, this was, I believe, the 19th, police released a 911 call placed by a neighbor who found the woman. My neighbor was calling my name, so I ran over there, and she had been bound behind her back. Someone came into her house and threw her against the wall and bound her up. In the background, the homeowner can be heard sobbing. She had been bound behind her back. Someone called her house and bound her, or came into her house, shoved her against the wall and hurt her. It looks like she has gone through things. It looks like they went through things in her house. The dispatcher tried to talk to the homeowner directly, The woman continuously cried and was obviously shaking to the point that 911 dispatcher had to talk to the neighbor again because she couldn't understand the woman. The homeowner could barely say yes and no to questions in the recording. The woman later told police investigators she did not recognize the intruder. He's still not been discovered as of the time that I have found this article. So he's still out there. There are so many things that this woman did wrong. I would say first and foremost, not having what is so important. I call it the survival mindset, as do I know you guys as well. And that's being in a state of preparedness. Jeff, do you think it's I know what you do in your home. Do you think it's smart to just completely let your guard down because you're in your own home?
No, absolutely not. I think it's pretty common knowledge that I am always armed in my house. I mean, it's just I don't. If I go outside, I'm armed. I don't go anywhere without a firearm on me because even in this area, as rural as it is, even up in New York across the border, some rural areas, there was 2 home invasions in the last couple of years. One was fatal for one of the homeowners. So it's not you even if you think you're in a place that's just totally safe, it may not be.
Yeah, and this woman again, right here next to my coffee cup, I got my SIG. My guard's down right now. I'm in my home. I've got my headsets on. I can't hear anything going on around me, but you're ready. Here's where she went wrong also. First of all, not being armed, not being ready. When you hear a noise in your home, and then she goes and investigates unarmed. The guy had a knife. And she still allowed him to do this to her. Yes, a knife is a dangerous, deadly, lethal weapon. She had discussions. What did they say here also? You know, as lawyers, we're trained to look at all the facts. The neighbors heard her calling the name. She should have been making such a huge noise and such a huge fuss that the neighbors would hear. She was not in a remote area. Where I am, people aren't going to hear you scream. But where she is, the neighbors would, in fact, hear her scream. In fact, I once lived in a very densely populated area when I was in West Hollywood, and one of my neighbors had started trouble with me and got physically violent, and I made a huge amount of noise. My screen door was open. I knew people would hear me. And this gentleman who was somewhat deranged, I was walking in the hallways out there, and the police came and took care of him. The bottom line was, no matter what, I did not give up. I made a lot of noise. And you just don't want to surrender when it comes to a situation like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to throw in here. You know, I live in a moderately populated area in Virginia, and I don't let my guard down either. I think that's a big mistake. You should always be ready. That's one of the things that you get taught in the military. You don't get taught as a civilian because you're taught to learn that society is civil enough that we don't have to deal with something like that. And that's why we have people in charge to make sure that we don't have to have problems like this, right? It's a zero-sum game where you're never going to have to worry about anything happening ever. Well, that's not the reality. The reality is that things like this do happen. You know, anybody who comes to my house on a couple of occasions, I've been seen actually in action. I stash weapons all around my house. I have them taped underneath things and up on top of other things. And my son, the one who's really good with handling knives and guns and stuff like that, he knows where everything's at. And we're ready. And usually one of us is home all the time. Yeah, we have an alarm system. Yes, we can lock the doors. But I can't emphasize enough, you're never in a perfect state of safety. When I was in combat, you know, they gave us a pistol, which was nice. I had a Glock 9mm. That was nice to have. And I got a long rifle, but it was only 5.56. And I had a boot knife. I had an additional sidearm. I had my .357 Python to make sure that things did stop, because that rifle doesn't necessarily stop everything. Neither does a pistol. You can't ever be ready enough, I don't think, in my own personal opinion.
You know, I'm also getting a message right now. By the way, you guys can send us messages on Facebook. I will read them. We still haven't figured out our phone situation, but we have a chat room on YouTube. And again, send us messages on Facebook. Michael has a very, very good point. I believe in the safety of a dog, especially if you're a woman that is home alone frequently or single. You know, if this woman had a dog in her house,
bingo,
you would have known. Absolutely. I would remember I was home alone when I was about 10 years old at my parents' house. And they had a big backyard, and this was in California. And my dogs were out of their minds, jumping against the windows in the back. They never did that before. I will never be convinced otherwise, that there was not somebody in the backyard at that time, and those dogs made them go away. The other benefit of a dog is a dog, even if it's a big dog, it can never be used as a weapon against you. A knife can be taken away. A gun can be taken away. That is not an issue with a dog. So I highly recommend that. I don't know if you remember the incident with Polly Klaas out in California. And there was a gentleman by the name of Randy Davis, and he was the one who prompted the 3 strikes laws in California. And he kidnapped her from her own room. She actually went willingly. She had her girls at the house. Her friends were at the house. I think her mom was at her mom's house. And this guy came up to the window and asked who the girl was that lived there. She came forward and she left with him. I don't know what was going through her head, why she did not know him ahead of time. Above and beyond this girl's foolishness, if they even had a 2-pound yapper, that dog would have made such a fuss. The mom would have been alerted and come to the room, and that dog would have been alive today. So again, that was a great point, Michael. I want to thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I think that's a great point also. I mean, we have 4 dogs here. We have smaller terrier that is just a monster, and all the way up to black lab, who immediately goes insane even if the mailman comes close to the house. They could tell even if some vehicle is pulling up close to the house. But it's only for the mailman who's not our regular mailman. If we have a stranger that comes by, the regular UPS guy or FedEx guy, they're good. They'll sit at the door, they'll wag their tails, they give them treats, and the dogs are happy. One replacement person, dogs are nutso. And I think that's a huge benefit of the dog. Dogs are actually the #1 crime deterrent in most communities.
I believe actually when they did a poll with, I guess, convicted burglars, they said, we will take a house with a alarm sign any day over a house that has a dog in it. So, you know, it's an unfortunate set of circumstances. And when I was actually taking my first firearms class, the instructor had a really good point. She said, I know it sounds silly, and this was before, I guess, the ability to track your position was perfected to the point that it is now. But even if it's difficult, she says, just have your address on the back of your phone. I mean, obviously, if you're not at home, that doesn't make, it's not as helpful. But if you're at home and something happens, and this woman couldn't even talk, she could barely talk. If they could ascertain her exact location, you can just read that off the back of your phone, and that helps you, because it's amazing what you forget when you're under that kind of stress. When we were on,
that's the other thing, Suzanne, is that you have these physical preparedness things, but you should also have technical preparedness. And in that way, I mean, I have people come through. So, and a lot of people know what I do. I'm into computers just a little bit. And I have set up over here at the house. I know when a telephone comes in range of my Wi-Fi system, it automatically alerts me. And it's not hard to do. It's something that you just set up at the router of your computer, and it'll force telephones to connect. So if anybody's coming up either through the woods in your backyard or something like that, you'll know that there's a phone, and I get an alert anytime somebody comes within a certain distance of my house because of the different types of Wi-Fi's that I'm running, and I force their phones to connect. It's very simple, and I would highly recommend people do something like that, because it's like having an early warning system built in your house. Now, I go a little bit extreme. I put range extenders out into the woods here at the house, and I have something built into the mailbox post out on the street. So I have a little bit more range when people are driving up the street. I can get them way down the road too. But again, it's something people should probably look into, because it does give you that much more notice that somebody's coming along, because everybody's carrying a cell phone that's connected to the Internet of Things some way, somewhere. And that's the easiest way of using their phone against them.
Absolutely. I never would have thought of that. That's very, very good. You know, an early detection, the more time you have to get some help or get yourself more prepared to get some to protect yourself. I want to bring up an article. I actually had the author of this article appear with me on my former show, The Suzanne Option. We did an entire episode on this, but I want to refer you to it's by Marksmanship Matters, and that's actually a self-defense school out here in the Provo, Utah area. Larry and Stacy Mudgett are the instructors, and they are, I highly recommend them. But he wrote an article, Why Surrender is Never an Option. And when I thought of this story, this woman in Midvale, it made me remember this article. And also I remember a story, one of the reasons that also, or the incidents that encouraged me, inspired me to become trained in firearms was, I'm sure you remember the situation in Connecticut, where a family of 4, husband and wife and 2 daughters, beautiful daughters, were subject to a home invasion. 2 gentlemen came into the home, and the mother and one of the daughters actually were taken to an ATM with one of these people to go get money. So here's a tremendous opportunity wasted. Forget the fact that the father was unarmed. Hey, you know, it's Connecticut. So he was unarmed, unable to defend his family. The mother and the daughter actually go out into public to an ATM with this guy. Imagine the fuss that they could have made and gotten attention and possibly saved everybody's life. But what did they do? They surrendered.
Nothing.
Because that they did absolutely nothing. So we're going to spend a few minutes on this article, and then we're going to get into some of the other topics with regards to technology and our loss of privacy. We're going to take advantage of the time we have here with our cybersecurity expert, Greg Carpenter. But the article is called Why Surrender is Never an Option. And he describes what he says are the phases of surrender. And the first phase of surrender is what we discussed in this stories that we talked about today. It's the failure to be armed, trained, and committed to fight. We are prepared to surrender when we are unprepared to resist. That ties directly into this woman's situation. Not only was she not armed, she obviously didn't have the mindset as well, going by how freaked out she was, and couldn't even talk when she was in a safe situation. She didn't resist at all. Neither did these poor people in Connecticut or poor Polly Klaas. The second phase is failing to be alert. Greg, you showed us what an extensive program you have, so you can be alert and get advanced warning. You must see trouble coming in order to have time to respond. The warning may be less than 1 second, but it will be there, and it must be recognized and acted upon immediately. Jeff Cooper has a fantastic book called about levels of preparation and how to respond to a threat. I think I'm actually going to go through that one day in a show coming up, maybe the next show. The third phase is giving up your weapons. The last phase of surrender is up to the monsters who have taken control of your life and perhaps the lives of your loved ones. The last phase of surrender is out of your hands. So by then your life is no longer up to you. He gets into issues of surrender during war, death by government. Surrendering to criminals is the part I'm going to focus on here. Again, this is in Marksmanship Matters, and I'm going to be posting this so you can read this. And he talks about the Onion Field murders. I'm sure you remember that, guys. This was in California, and this was a wake-up call to law enforcement officers, beg your pardon, everywhere. It took place on March 9th of 1963. 2 LAPD officers were taken prisoner. Officers submitted to capture and gave up their weapons. They were driven to an onion field outside of Bakersfield. One officer was murdered while the other managed to escape in a hail of gunfire. The surviving officer survived a serious psychological case, having been unable to save his partner. As a result, the LAPD policy became, you will fight no matter how bad things are. You will never surrender your weapon or yourself to a criminal.
You know, the interesting thing about the Onion Field murders was that both of these guys were former Marines.
You're kidding me.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
On
Greg Powell and Jim Smith, right? Yeah, they were both Marines.
That's very sad. Ogden, this was a case out of here. This was particularly brutal. Record store murders. The manner in which the criminals murdered their young victims, he chose not to describe it here. Resistance might have been futile, but compliance was definitely, absolutely futile. He actually had these people drink drain cleaner. He said it was medicine to help them sleep, and they drank this. This is also, now we talked about the Connecticut family home invasion. The problem is when you trust these people to not harm you, if they say, we will let you go if you do what we say, you are entrusting your very lives and the lives of your family members to people who have already proven themselves to be untrustworthy and, in fact, dangerous. Criminals are sometimes member of a satanic cult worship. We have the Night Stalker killer. Remember that in California? Eliminating potential witnesses is often a reason to kill a victim. Criminals simply enjoy causing suffering and death. There are people that are pure evil. You have to be ready for this. I remember I was in my early 20s during the Night Stalker days in California, and we were out in the Delta, in the middle of nowhere. But I remember lying there being terrified because I didn't know where this one man in our entire state was. It is not fun when you are worried about this. Folks, train, prepare. There's no reason to be in fear. You have to level the playing field. So this woman just brought all that up. He also says here, a woman who begs for mercy can give the attacker tremendous feeling of power in which many criminals seem to enjoy. You cannot expect mercy from someone who does not know what mercy is. Resist, he says. We have a duty to ourselves, our loved ones, our neighbors, our community, our city. What did Colonel Cooper say? The criminal does not fear the police. He does not fear the judges, the juries, the criminal justice system. If we are to be safe, the criminal must be taught to fear his intended victims. They are the ones that need to be afraid, folks, not us. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I was going to say, in the U.S. military, the Code of Conduct, one of the things I remembered was Article 3. It just came up now. If I am captured, I will continue to resist by all means. I will make every effort to escape and aid others to escape. I will accept neither parole nor special favor from the enemy. I think that's right. But it's been a while since I recited my general orders. But basically, you never give up. You never submit, even if captured by the enemy, right? Okay, this is a similar type of a scenario. Many of the enemy that you face in combat are very sadistic. They're not good people. They're not nice people. The people that don't make the grade, the people that don't get the promotions, the people that are disgruntled, upset, unhappy, they're the ones that run the prisoner of war camps in pretty much every military. So they've been passed over. They've been stepped on, and they're probably going to be the people that, are the crime-finding guys, I would say. So you always resist. You never give in. You never give up. I mean, you'll end up like in the onion field, like the officer. You're gonna end up dead
Yeah,
if
and
you give up in any way.
And what Larry says here too, reasoning with a thug who believes that his failures that you mentioned earlier just now are because of people like you is not likely to be helpful. Again, like you said, these people have been stepped on. They've been passed over. They're resentful. Somebody's going to pay. He also mentions pleading with a terrorist who has been taught from birth that his salvation depends on murdering people like you is also a doomed plan. If somebody has a gun, the gun may not be real. This guy only had a knife in Midvale. If you're tied up, it's not going to matter. The gun may not be loaded. This woman allowed herself to be tied up. After you are tied up, again, if you allow yourself to be tied up or otherwise confined, go straight to phase 4. Your survival is no longer in your hands. You are now at the mercy of a psychopath. He may not know how to operate this gun. If you're tied up, it will not matter. Always resist. I remember seeing this story. It just came to my mind. She was actually interviewed on television. She was subjected to a similar situation, only her attacker, her home invader, had a firearm on him. He left it in her bathroom. And don't you know, when she went in the bathroom, there was his gun. She barricaded herself in there. What did she do next? How do you think the story ended up?
I think that she let him know that the gun was there.
She gave it back to him.
Yeah, see, that's
Gave it back to him. She should have shot him in the face, and she gave him the gun back. And the whole story, the media just adored her because the whole story became one of compassion and trust. And oh my gosh, I was just sitting there screaming at the television. Again, if you run, here's what he talks about now.
That's a Stockholm syndrome.
It absolutely. So you're faced now with somebody with a firearm. Statistically, if you run and they shoot at you, it's more than likely your assailant's going to miss. It's hard to shoot people with pistols. The average criminal isn't going to be somebody that takes the time to train and prepare and be responsible with firearms, okay? We've seen how they shoot, okay? So odds are they're going to miss. Statistically, if you run and he shoots and hits you, you're not going to die. Bad guys shooting at the police miss 90% of the time. The odds are on your side.
Think about this, the gunfight at the OK Corral.
Yeah.
95% of the bullets missed, and these guys were within 20 feet of each other.
And yet we have been so conditioned. Remember Eric Holder, I think he had said we need to brainwash people to be afraid of firearms. That's exactly what happens. People see a gun and they just turn to mush and will capitulate and do anything and go straight to stage 4. Okay? There are things worse than death. Surrender to a criminal or a terrorist and you're going to learn what they are. Resist. He says if you resist with a commitment to win, you may very well prevail, especially if you are armed and trained. If you lose, it is still better to die fighting in place than to be taken prisoner, have your head cut off with a dull knife while your screams gurgle through your own blood. Folks, that's the point of what we want to say here. Just be prepared. Never, ever surrender. Never give up.
Remember, when you're shooting at someone or they're shooting at you with a pistol, like we just talked about, 90%, statistically, 90% of the bullets will miss at a range of 20 feet or more. You need to prepare. You need to practice so that your aim is better than your assailant or the adversary. You have a very good chance of putting more bullets in the target if you practice, as opposed to just pulling it and shooting from the hip per se.
Yep. One aspect of this article, excuse me again, I beg your pardon. One
You want some humidity? We got plenty of humidity out here in the People's Democratic Republic.
One thing I try to do out here is when I have my wood stove going, I always put a pot of water on there to try and get some humidity in the air here. But yeah, it makes it difficult. He ties into this article, and this is a good segue with where our government is going right now. We've got these Democrat socialists, which is a euphemism for Marxists, that are taking control of the House. And we know that the socialists are the Democrat Party is starting to go via a hard left. We've got two Democrat socialists, one from Michigan, and then we have Ocasio-Cortez in office, and they are absolutely brazen with the policies they're promoting. When going back to Larry Mudgett's article here, he talks about government, the most deadly thing we've had on earth with regards to killing people has been government. He talks about William Ayers, remember the former leader of the terrorist organization Weather Underground, good friend, of Barack Obama. He told his followers, when we, the communist revolutionaries, take over the United States and look at the progress they have made, we will have to kill 25 million Americans. He was referring to those who would never submit to a communist takeover. Those who would refuse to deny and reject the Constitution would have to be murdered. If this sounds impossible, remember the genocide by government was the leading cause of death in the last century. So now let's take a look at the folks that we've got coming in. They've taken over the House right now. This is their first day. The Democrats have taken over the House of Representatives. We have proposed some radical policies. The party agenda is increasingly, this is an article off of the Faux News Network, aka Fox. The party agenda is increasingly embracing big government policies like Medicare for all and guaranteed jobs programs, as well as an aggressive New Deal that will include all of this and more as a fundamental overhaul to America's economy and specifically its energy sector. Now, why I'm tying this in with the energy sector is we've got now, let me see if I can try and find that article here, that they're trying to have energy providers, excuse me, supplying our internet now. And one of the problems with that is going to be privacy. Do you want to expound upon that, Greg?
Sure, absolutely. One of the biggest issues we face today is called the Internet of Things. And that's the interconnection of pretty much every single technology out there together via Wi-Fi. And it's not only Wi-Fi, but mostly Wi-Fi that connects these things together. And we look at this and we herald it as a super dynamic and awesome achievement in technology, when in reality, it's a huge drawback to us. And we don't even know it. We don't even know what we're looking at. When you connect things with Wi-Fi, people in my line of business are able to, for example, take the car that you're driving, inject certain types of malicious code into the car, and then get that code into your house when you pull into your garage. We can transfer it into your garage for you. Additionally, from there, once it's in your garage, it goes into the Wi-Fi in your house. And from the Wi-Fi in your house, it goes downhill from there. We can eventually, I would say, own everything that's in your house because we can connect it to the router in your house. Once we do that, we can have the connection to your credit cards, your personal history, your children's information, everything in the world that you really don't want a bad person to have access to is exactly what you're going to give us access to. So now that we have the opportunity to hook up the electrical grid, the government, on the other hand, as opposed to some malicious hacking individual or whatever, the government, on the other hand, will have the opportunity to monitor every single thing that you do. And when I say everything, I mean everything. When you turn the heat up in your house, you could be penalized for that. The amount of heat that you use can be penalized for that. If you want to cool your house off in the summer, you can be penalized for that. That's just rudimentary. From there, they can also connect backwards out to your car and identify how much energy your car is using. What if you accelerate quickly? You do those jackrabbit starts. You could be penalized by the government for doing jackrabbit starts because you're wasting energy, wasting fuel, depending upon what the EPA and other federal non-elected agencies think is proper for you to do, and it goes downhill from there.
When you mentioned the car, let me interject real quick. When we rented a car when I was out in New York with my son, he was out there for a race. He's a race car mechanic, and we rented this car. It was one of those electric hybrid gizmos, and they actually had on the dashboard display a spectrum that showed with the RPMs. When you got to a certain point, they were called aggressive
driving. Yes.
What if you have to? Every time we went up a hill, it was aggressive. It was called aggressive driving.
We're gonna have to keep an eye on you. Yeah.
Right. So you could get penalized for every time they assume that you're driving aggressively or go over a speed limit. Because now, if you combine this with GPS, think about the other places also where they have municipal codes where you're not allowed to idle your car, or where you're not allowed to warm it up. Like in Michigan, we had my friend Nicholas Somberg, an attorney out there who represented a client who was ticketed for having their vehicle running in sub-zero weather so they could get their toddler in there. Well, again, I live in the middle of nowhere, and I kind of laugh and go, yeah, I can warm my truck up when it's below zero out, and I can get into a warm, comfy car. What if they have now the ability this car's been idling for more than 2 minutes. We're going to shut it off. We're going to shut it off automatically. Think about now, tie this also with our smart grids. As you mentioned, too much power. You're using too much power. I get a report every month from Rocky Mountain Power Association, who, by the way, if you're going to send your bill in, you have to use the same envelope that they send you in the interest of saving paper. But they use the same amount of paper to put in advertisements and promotions and then send me a separate mailing. You would think they could combine the two in the interest of environmentalism, but no, I get a separate report comparing me and my energy usage to that of my neighbors. And they tell me I'm either you're good, you're better, or you're not, your energy use is poor compared to that of your neighbors. Remember our episode on social credits?
That's exactly right. You're going to be looking at a situation not too far in the future, I'd have to say, where you'll have a graduated tax, and your graduated tax will be associated with your energy use also. You use more energy, you'll be taxed at a higher rate. Another socialist concept.
Yeah, and this is part of this new Green Deal. We've proven that man-made climate change is a hoax. We know that. You would think maybe these people would be backing off. But here again, this New Deal social credit. Now let's tie this also in with what else do we have going on? How else are they watching us? How about facial recognition scanning features? We just had a lawsuit, and this was out of Silicon Valley Business Journal. Google was sued over face scanning features in the Google Photos. Federal judge in Illinois on Saturday threw out a case involving Alphabet Inc., owned Google's ability to identify people in photos. Remember on Facebook, we used to see that where you'd put up a picture and it would have the people's names. Do you wish to tag this person? I think that went away. I don't know if it still happens. I haven't seen it.
It's still there, and you have additional issues too, where people play these games. What's your what's your favorite color, or what
Oh,
would you have
yeah.
been in a different life, or something like that.
What's your animal? What drink are you? Come on, people.
Pull your head out of your
What cowboy
fourth.
western would you be?
Yeah, what outlaw
Yeah,
are you? You know,
pull your head out of your fourth point of contact, as we say in the airborne units here, and wake the heck up, please. You're giving them so much power over you. You're giving them the opportunity to collect all this information about you. Did you think at all about what spirit animal you are? Does it matter what spirit animal you are? I'm sorry. I can't even think how this would matter in a real person's life, to be honest with you. But all that information, all that demographic information is collected and it's sold. It doesn't just sit there and pile up somewhere in some back room. Information's valuable, and wars have been fought just on information, just to get information. So don't think that any type of a government organization or private organization going to avoid um, abusive manners in which to collect information on people. It happens all the time.
and it comes at us under the auspices of something that's fun and entertaining, or that's helpful. It will, what's the word they use? Enhances our internet experience. Think of those Snapchat filters. Do you think anything's being done?
Snapchat. Snapchat was great because they actually put together a full database of all the pictures of everyone who did those 2 second, or whatever they are, 10-second uh, pictures of themselves that they put in Snapchat. Because it goes away after 10 seconds, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
only on your phone, pal. Let me tell you. Everywhere else, guess what? That picture is replicated and sent all over the place. You're the only one stupid enough to think that that picture goes away forever. Those pictures get taken and they get put into a database, so they can be used later on by who? Oh, Facebook. Oh, Instagram. Oh boy, all those other guys who have sharing agreements with different governments. Did you ever think that it's not only the U.S. government that is rather draconian in the way it deals with people that don't comply? No, no. You think again, please. Think again.
Well, also look at now how they're talking about ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, and starting to say that those who question authority, now they're calling that, rather than being, I don't know, a free thinker. Now, if you're opposing government, it's a disorder.
That's odd.
Let's tie that in to some of the now universal background check laws that are going to ensnare people with these perceived disorders. Tie that in with the social credits. Tie that in with the people posting their pictures with them and their firearms on social media. This is all coming together from so many different angles. What a tangled web we lead. I mean, this
is interesting, Suzanne, because one of the oh boy, what was it? Scowen wrote the book on the 45 Goals of Communism. And one of the goals of communism was to get people into the business of diagnosing different types of medical illnesses in order to help the state. And I can see that something like this is completely in line. I mean, people that don't have mental illnesses are being identified as having mental illnesses. That's completely in line with the communist goals. I find it very interesting.
Yeah, the re-education camps, and what was it? Our government's doing that now. There was actually a poacher who, a part of his punishment was he had to watch Bambi. So what won't they make you do? Here's another aspect. How many of us have seen, I won't submit this. I mean, I have to admit, I fell for the Facebook thing. Oh, it's fun. It's no problem. Oh, and you know what? These little games, they're fun too. I will not engage. Every time one of those comes up on my feed,
Yeah.
I block them. immediately. But you tie that in with, again, the facial recognition or ancestry, DNA.
Oh, that DNA thing is a scam.
Who is, and do you even trust the results? I mean, you can't. So anyway, you're submitting your DNA, and a drug company just bought access to that. Any problems there, Greg?
Genetic manipulation of medication. Oh, sure. Yeah, no, that's it. And oh God, no. I see that that's a huge downfall. It's a huge downfall. You can genetically limit or enhance the number of people in any specific racial category whatsoever. This is tragic.
I think this is something we're going to have to spend more time on, because you and I have talked about nanotechnology and DNA manipulation, and we are voluntarily submitting all of this information to them. Now, I would think that they already have a lot of this as part of, in California. I know my children were both born there. In that hospital room, they come in and they do a blood test on your kids to determine, it's just to make sure he doesn't have certain allergies, and it's mandatory. You cannot refuse this gathering of this biological data. There is no doubt in my mind that this information isn't stored in perpetuity. Am I being paranoid, Greg?
No, I don't think so. I really don't think so, because genetic tagging, genetic manipulation, this is the stuff that I'm working on as part of my research right now. These things are real. This is the wave of the future. Genetically manipulated drugs is a good one. That's where you have a drug that works on only one specific genetic genome, or a certain expression of the genes, the DNA, in a certain way. You may have the same gene, but it gets used, or the application of it is different from somebody else, how they do it. So the drug will affect you differently from someone else. Every person you're going to have design. I mean, it's what they call in the business. They call them designer medications. And designer medications will basically affect one person or another in a different way. Technically, you could target one specific medication that affects the Cherokee Nation. You could create one type of medication that will affect people of Japanese origin, not necessarily descent. So you could look at something like this as the beginning of government-sanctioned genocide tools.
I was just going to say, is it conceivable that this technology could be weaponized? We're even seeing this right now without that technology. A hospital worker said she would give Jews the wrong medicines. Did you hear this story? Ohio hospital worker said that she would give Jewish people the wrong medication. She was fired from there.
Wow.
So, yeah. She was a supervised, resident at a clinic in Ohio from July to September of 2018 in a clinic. She was listed as working there as of December 2018 on some websites. They were made aware of comments that she posted on social media, and they got rid of her. How many of these people are smart enough to keep their big mouths shut?
Too many.
Yeah. So, it's just imperative to be aware of what's happening to you in these hospitals. Again, you're in a very vulnerable position there. I just see them coming at us from so many angles, Greg. Is there a way to even protect yourself today? Other than, of course, setting all your social media posts to friends only.
Boy, well, honestly, when you select friends only, you're selecting friends only plus the NSA, the GRU, and the Chinese intel and South African intel. So there's really no way to avoid having all your private stuff shared. with governments around the world. So if somebody can, there's certain places. So I spent 27 years in the Army and a whole bunch of time at the National Security Agency.
Oh,
so
we got to wrap it up, Greg, because I see we're out of time. Go ahead.
Okay, certain places I can't go in the world, and basically that's going to happen to other people too. They're going to be in a situation where they're going to be limited as far as what they can do, where they can go, and what they can say to people.
And there's more coming. Folks, we're going to be talking about this a lot in this upcoming new year. I see a shift of power coming, and it is imperative that we get ready for it and come up with ways to take power away from Washington, D.C. We'll be talking a lot about this in the upcoming year. I want to thank you for joining us, Suzanne Sherman, Jeff Johnson, and Greg Carpenter over here on the Cerberus Radio Network. Thank you for listening.